Welcome, everyone. This is our last discussion of John Behr's book, The Mystery of Christ. Josh Moneykeisen is not with us. He is glorifying his body on the white sand of somewhere in the Bahamas. So Tony is back. Tony is read up and he is ready to talk. And so, in the absence of Josh and music, here's this invitation that is found in this last chapter. Bear writes, "Offer to God your heart, soft and pliable, and retain the shape with which the fashioner shaped you." So we're going to talk about the body, which I think is appropriate given the lectionary gospel, both this past Sunday and this coming Sunday. Jesus is fasting in the wilderness last week, and this week it's Nicodemus asking very reasonable questions about how you can climb back up in your mother's womb. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So Tony, welcome, and give us your thoughts now that you've had a chance to take a look at some of Behr's stuff here.
Yeah, well, I read the chapter for tonight. I don't have the larger context of the whole book because I other than what you and Josh gave me last week, and it sounded like the big ticket items were really in those three chapters in terms of the notion of the disciples not being able to get it until after the crucifixion, resurrection, and the change from being disciples to apostles, from being those who follow to those who are sent. So this chapter didn't right away seem to me super connected to those themes, but it was, it was kind of the body positivity chapter.
You look great, Tony.
And I thought it was well done. You kind of Behr tries to get between the Scylla and the Charybdis of the Scylla being that Christianity is to blame for everything to do with bad body imagery and dislike and shame and etc. on one hand, and the Charybdis on the other of no, Christianity is really very bodily. It's we're breaking bread and eating blood and drinking blood and so bodily.
Touching people.
What?
And touching people,
doing all kinds of things, watering people's heads and bodies, and so he really, as I understood it, he talks about our ambivalence toward the body, and he's trying to, as I say, chart a course between extremes. And he focuses also on the passions, which is language that I associate perhaps more with the Roman Catholic Church, and perhaps with Eastern Orthodoxy, which is his home. I don't know enough about that to know that, but I think bottom line, what he's saying is that the body is God's good gift. God looked upon it and said, looked upon the world and said, it is good. And that includes the body and the body's appetites and desires. But the problem is the mind. I remember one time when I was a very young pastor going to some kind of, I think it was a community, like baccalaureate service or something, or graduation, I don't know, for high school kids. And the minister got up and said, "Do you know what the most powerful sexual organ in the body is?" Yeah. And he said, the mind.
I'm
And
sure
and
that
that's
I'm sure that wasn't awkward for any of the students there.
yeah, right. Yeah. Uh and he's kind of saying that. He's kind of saying it's your mind that 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 gets either you on the right track or gets you off the right track in terms of the use and abuse of the body.
Hmm.
Um, the sinfulness is a quote from some page of the passions, therefore, does not reside in the materiality of the body that is created by God, but in the manner in which the mind regards and abuses the body and its impulses and appetites. Uh, I don't know if pastorally that helps that much. I mean, but you know, my favorite line was, I think it was a quote from Irenaeus. It was, "We must learn to relax in the hands of God to let God be the creator."
Mm.
Um, and that's pastorally helpful. Yeah, a long discussion of the body, Christian ambivalence about the body, about the passions, anger, eroticism, would be examples of that. But, but it's not, I think when talking about anger, he said, you know, unless your mind nurses anger with envy and judgment and all kinds of other stuff, anger is sort of like a bubble that'll burst and go away. A kind of a distinction between, I guess, emotions and attaching judgments to all that and kind of giving it a longer lifespan than it perhaps would have on its own. So, yeah. So, it's kind of the body is a good gift of God, and, uh, and the idea that the body is the source of all temptation, I guess that's still alive in some quarters, but he would say, I think it's more the mind
Hmm.
and the way the mind, uses and abuses the body or exaggerates our impulses and appetites.
Yeah, I mean, he says it clearly that the mind turns the body into an idol. Um,
Mhm,
and uh, so I, I was thinking. So I reread this chapter today, but earlier this morning I talked about Jacques Ellul's book "Presence in the Modern World" with Sarah Himlicky. So I was rereading these pages in light of Ellul,
mhm,
um, pointing out the extent to which the modern world is constantly at work to privilege information and technique, um, and that the church is often complicit in those systems. And so yeah, so I read Behr on the glory of the body as a reminder that uh, in a lot of quarters of Christianity, on the one hand, there are those who espouse a kind of purity culture still, shame uh, people, usually women, um, uh, over like material things. But then I think on the other part of the Christian spectrum, we have reduced a lot of the faith to ideas.
yeah,
Um,
yep,
and I remember my wife and I were touring. I mean, it was just like an open church there in Thessaloniki in Greece. It was an Orthodox church. Um, and so it's just filled with chapels and people coming and going, and there, people are kissing icons. There was a priest like moving around the room and just like kissing random people on the forehead, and just the tactile nature of the
Hmm.
faith, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's very different than thinking I can watch a worship service on my screen, um, and that is sufficient, right? Um, and so, yeah, I think there is an embodiedness to the Christian faith, that I think maybe we have lost, and John Behr has used the church fathers here to kind of point out a detriment.
Is modern technology Gnostic? I mean, it does
uh,
seem to invite us to live a disembodied existence. That's what you're saying or implying.
mhm. Yeah, I mean it's this is a point that like Robert Jensen makes in his book, uh, Visible Words. It's a book on the sacraments, and his point is, if the Eucharist is a feast of the future kingdom, like you need to have bread on that table that can be seen from every angle in the church. Like it has to look like a banquet. And
Right.
if you're gonna baptize people, like shame on you for like you know
Yep.
sprinkling a baby with just a few drops of water that no one can see. Like
Yep. Yep.
it has to be seen. Um, yeah, Todd.
Um, I don't know. I'll jump in and at least offer when Tony mentioned Bear's description of anger. I had a therapist friend years ago. We were talking about a mutual situation, and he described anger as a parasitic uh,
Mhm.
experience. For him, anger was always rooted in fear, and so anger tapped the energy of those internal fears. I doubt he ever read Bear, but it does seem that the way we view the body and how the mind works as it views its own body can certainly lead to a lot of fears that would produce anger on, I would think, any number of levels. And so I thought that was an interesting note. Um, I I confessed earlier, I might as well now that I didn't get all of the chapter read, but
Tisk, tisk, tisk.
the thing that yeah, we were dealing with death, and the body, and last couple days, but the thing that struck me, what I did get to was this ongoing creation that he describes, that really the work of the risen one, as we describe it in cross and resurrection, becomes the place where we learn what it is to be human, and at the same time, uh, if we are to borrow the line from Irenaeus that Tony mentioned, if we're willing to be held in those ways, God's going to create that awareness, that will become like Him. So I thought that was an interesting way to talk about our future, or I think I heard you say when I listened to last week's session, sanctification that God does to us. So I just thought that was a pretty interesting image. And I don't know if you want to kind of add what I might be lacking in that, but I thought that his emphasis on that God's work of creation in us is ongoing.
Mhm.
It's not something that ends once we exit the womb. And so
or are
he borrowed.
baptized, or
Right. And so he is. I just found that pretty fascinating that he went back to emphasizing creation as um, a word picture, a means to help us recognize that we're becoming human in as much the same way that we are becoming like Jesus, who was the true human. So it's just a couple things that I found pretty interesting
I
that
mean,
that uh, hadn't heard couched in quite those ways.
I do think it's, like in that quote that I read, he gets that from Athanasius, that he refers to God so often as fashioner. Um, I think, we privilege information, we reduce Christianity to ideas, we reduce Jesus and God to forgiver. Yeah, and so I do think but he also has the caution too, right? That if the problem is the mind, if the mind is uh that which can rationalize what the heart desires, as Cramner would say, um embodied practices by themselves um are always going to be twisted
Mm-hmm.
um into idolatry. Um and yeah. And so there is it, it's important that the gospel is a word that is heard, not seen. And so like that remains, I think, um, that the ordering of that needs to be kept, right? That you're saved through the ear, Tony. Um, um, but yeah, I think the Gnostic temptation, danger, is always there. Um, yeah,
so
yeah.
how much is the kind of the suspicion of the body? Last week we mentioned patriarchy in some context. How much of the suspicion of the body as a part of Christianity is a part of that, and really a way of kind of, um, I guess, ensuring male predominance and female subordinates.
hmm I'm sure that's part of it, right? it's, I think, I think, to the extent that a lot of Christians are comfortable talking about the body, it's we're comfortable talking about what other people may or may not do with them. Um, while at the same time, uh, so Tony, all right, so you mentioned you weren't sure if this was pastorally helpful or not. One of the things that it got me thinking, that has long bothered me as a pastor, um, and this is not to in any way impugn hospice or hospice workers. Um, but I'm almost 50. I'm old enough now to have seen um, it has become more commonplace for people to allow their loved ones to die off stage under the care of someone other than themselves. And that is unique, I think, in the history of the church. Um, and as people are in their last days, I've heard so many people say, well, he's not really here now. That's not really her. And I think that is not of the gospel. And psychologically, I think it's unhelpful for people. Um, so, yeah, so I think it's important for Protestants, at least, to remember that, you know, the identity that is Todd Littleton cannot be separated from his material existence.
Mm.
And as we care for people, we need to care for them with more than just our thoughts.
Yeah.
That's my rant for tonight.
Yeah. Well, there are some traditions, pretty much, rare, I guess, or not well known, where the care of the not only the body before death, but the body after death is a part of that, part of the practice of faith. And I think that's I don't know what extent that's, the norm in Jewish communities. It is in some. Um, yeah. Yeah, so those 2 kinda go together, the schizophrenia, if you will, about sex and the denial of death, and
Hmm.
the farming it out to other people to manage for us, and
Most of whom, at least at least on the East Coast, most of whom are Orthodox Christians from Africa. so, um, so it's
well, that may be a plus. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the truth is that a lot of the care of people in their last months and even years of life is being done by immigrants
hmm
in our
yeah.
culture.
Um, okay. Well, okay. So, all right, I didn't mean to get us sidetracked with death and funerals. So yeah. So Todd, you were open about not having read everything, but what you did read, what did you think worth pointing out for people?
Um, well, the Friday, I think um, I think he draws some of those early themes uh, together in a way that I think are helpful in thinking about um, how we view the body. And so for instance, when you started a few weeks ago, and we were talking about um, the disciples, particularly on the road to Emmaus, not recognizing um, till and so we kind of work with the whole idea of not recognizing Jesus. But then after the resurrection, those instances became more clear, and he has a line here in on 143. Within the limits of this world, it is death which seals the life story of each person,
Mhm.
revealing the final shape of that narrative and the identity of the person as they are remembered within this world. Um, so that so also the life and identity of each person who turns to Christ is stamped or sealed by their baptism in imitation of Christ's own death, dying to sin and this world. Yet, for now, their life and true identity lies hidden with Christ in God, awaiting the decisive moment of their actual death, which will reveal whether their heart is still attached to this world, so making the transition of death painful, or whether it lies with God, so that they will be able to say, with Christ and the martyrs, into thy hands I commend my spirit, a self offering which makes their whole life and being, even in death, Eucharistic.
Yeah, it's
Um,
beautiful. I love that.
yeah, what struck me is that while you were trying to turn us away from death and funerals, um, with the pitch to me, this does seem that at this particular uh, point, he's talking about what's observed at our death, and I, I that just kind of was one of those. Uh, I hadn't thought about it like that before. I don't
Mhm.
want to think of it in terms of decentering, but we don't when don't often. I don't know about you all, but we don't often um, posit the character or condition of the person at the moment of death. we sit with families, we listen, we know what our own experience has been, and we whether we want to use the word evaluate or whatnot, we wonder if there is. I don't know how to say this well on his medium. Uh, is there enough? Is there enough witness that there was? Because if Christ was what they were holding on to, we don't think about that at the point of death. At what this seems to describe. So it just was kind of a.
So, say more.
Well, I think what I'm trying to get at is I don't know that we have let me try another way. I think we've talked about it. Probably not at class time, but there's a very concerted effort in the funeral service that I was a part today that to Eli death was to say we're here to celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we take that step, our callbacks are always to those emotive events where the one who has died has endeared themselves to us, or to a group, or to a family, whatever role they played. It's not a callback a majority of the time to. It's too preachy to talk about their devotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's too spiritual to describe their particular habits. And I guess that's what kind of caused a bit of the start reading this, that in that particular moment I was in, and the particular things that were going on, that no one sat there and said, well, what was Jerry like when he died?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the passage you read is an invitation for death to be holy.
Yes.
And for it to be, yes, a moment of significance. Into thy hands I commend my spirit, O Lord. And oddly enough, in light of our topic, that we're so focused on the biology of death, that the spiritual significance, I think, has been eroded. Andy Root, in his most recent book, Evangelism in an Age of Despair, talks about celebration of life services being really about the self as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the last chance to make the case for the self having successfully, lived life. And I think there's a lot to that the focus in celebration of life services tends to be what's happened in this life, which is not without importance, needs to be honored and mentioned. And it's not to say we just need to, gloss over that and say he's in a better place now or something like that. But it is to say that death, uh, pre anticipated in baptism, is an act, whether fully conscious or not, by those formed in a certain faith, of offering themselves into God's eternal care.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to me to dignify death in a way that we're lacking in many ways in our culture and in our church. today.
Yeah, maybe I've mentioned this before. So, so it was last spring. I was part of a Templeton grant project with Ryan Burge and Tony Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did like a huge survey of the nuns, NONES. And so as part of that, they gathered me and a handful of other people, like 5 or 6 people, um, to review their data before they released it. And so I was the only non-PhD there. I was the only preacher there. I think I was the only believer there. Um, and I remember there's this woman professor of sociology, I believe, um, who was talking about how her fiance, husband, and she was probably about your age, Tony. And she was talking about
Oh,
how she was talking about how in her his retirement he was very engaged in this volunteer work and this civic work and this philanthropic work and how he's not a believer, but he really thinks that all these contributions to his community, through that he'll live on after he dies. And I tried to muster up as much pastoral presence as I could, and I just was like, but they, they that's not true. like, like eventually everything that we've done will be forgotten. If there's not a God who can hold all of it within himself and give it back again. Um, I think, it isn't just that we've reduced Christianity to ideas and technology, um, in a Gnostic sort of way. I think, yeah, I think you're right, Tony, to point out that um, there's a kind of despair underneath all of that.
well, yeah. Root's kind of whole argument is about how this focus on the self uh, really becomes another form of works righteousness. That we have to produce a successful self, and that's a tremendous amount of pressure, and it's entirely a self a self-driven enterprise, and it's quite and his argument is that it leads to isolation and really inability to deal with sorrow.
Hmm.
And he has is I think kind of a wonderful idea that uh, the evangelism, which has so many associations and so many of them negative, has something to do with being present to people in their sorrow, not with quick answers or not with uh, solutions, but with a presence and with holding in a way that people might encounter
Hmm.
Jesus.
Well,
Uh,
and that's so why does evangelism have a negative connotation? It has a negative connotation in large part, right? Because total strangers show up to where you live or where you are. They don't know you, and um, and and a judgmental posture, a posture of superiority, a posture of I know more. Um, hand you a piece of information, um, to try to get you to make a decision, abstracted from their lived life. Um, and so that
yeah.
so there is, which is exactly, like the problem that St. Paul had with the people he called super apostles is that, his congregants thought they were better than Paul because they were overly familiar with Paul's weaknesses. And these people didn't appear to have any weaknesses, so they must be better. And Paul's whole point in the Corinthian correspondence is like, you only know this about me because I've told you. I hadn't veiled myself in the way that Moses did. Um, and so there's
Well, and Root's argument would be that culturally we're invited to veil ourselves In other words, instead of reveal ourselves, as Paul does in talking about his foibles and failures and many shipwrecks, um, and that can be overdone too, of course. But it 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 relates to the theme here because it basically the veiling that occurs in the effort to present ourselves as something other than we are is often a disembodied.
Mhm.
I mean, we may be smiling and look great, but so that's bodily, but it's very selective. It's it's not showing our wounds. Christ comes back and shows his wounds.
Well, and the irony is, right, that like as soon as Brene Brown convinces all of us that sharing our vulnerability, making ourselves vulnerable to another is powerful, we we are all then incentivized to do that, to the degree that we're comfortable with doing that, and so we choose the wounds that we display.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got a couple I'll show you, but some I won't.
yeah, so
Right.
yeah, I mean, so this is I think Robert Jensen talks about how the gospel can never be preached the same way twice because it's always a particular word of promise to a particular person based on their present, and how they experience the world in that moment. And that implies, and gets back to Sarah and I were talking about the mainline church's unthinking adoption of AI over the past year or so. And, like the need to have an actual embodied pastor, preacher. You need to have someone who has lived a material life with you, um, such that they know what your life is like, so they know how to apply the law and the gospel to you, because they're not
Which is,
abstractions.
yeah, sort of the doctrine of the incarnation.
Yeah,
You need you need a God who has lived our lives with us. Only a suffering God can help.
whoever said that's a smart guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Wasn't me.
it's it's funny too, like in the context of this chapter. Uh, Rereading Charles Marsh's Strange Glory, the biography of
Mm,
Bonhoeffer, and how when Bonhoeffer became director of the emergency pastor seminary at Finkenwald, um, one of the things he sought to do, right, was institute a regular life of prayer and worship among
mhm.
the students and faculty. And he called it a new kind of monasticism, a sort of Protestant monastery. Uh, and what I had forgotten is how, and that's what like then gets taken up into his book Life Together, which is usually one of the two books that uh, lay people have read of Bonhoeffer. Um, but the students all rebelled. Like they hated it. But they absolutely hated that kind of ordered, embodied life together, because of their hyper Protestant upbringing. Yeah, that's interesting.
So they
Mainly,
just wanted to discuss theological doctrines and concepts?
and well, so uh, what's interesting about that is Marsh. Um, Marsh makes a point to say that if you just read Discipleship, which he was writing around the same time, or Life Together, or if you read his lectures at Finkenwald, you can come away with a very stern portrait of Bonhoeffer as a hyper Christian, um, seeking holiness. Someone like Saint Anthony, right? As James Behr writes about in this chapter. And so Marsh says it's important to remember that at the same time he's writing Discipleship, he's also going swimming in the afternoon with the students. Like they're playing, they're listening to Harlem Renaissance records at night and drinking and have and so there's there's a role that play and food and drink played with them too, that creates a fuller picture of their life together.
Well, that raises, I think, a question that let's talk about, and I'd love to hear the people in the comments line pitch in on this. But what does it look to you like to glorify God in the body? What would that, I mean, I go to the gym most every day, and there's some folks there who, I mean, it's I'm not a perfect specimen. Most of us aren't, but there are some that are pretty
So, I
pretty
mean, do you work
whatever.
out? Do you work out in your jeans like RFK Jr.?
I am in the sauna doing push-ups, and I try to drink raw milk, and I offer it to whoever else is. No, no, that is not what I do. And so, well, that's a case in point. Is that glorifying God in our body? What might it look like? I used to have, friends. We would go to Zabar's Delicatessen in New York when I was in seminary, and we'd stand in
Yeah.
front of the cases, and we'd say, "Ah, the glorious feast of the kingdom of God." And it was, it was about all the food we were picking out and going to have and drink good wine with and stuff like that. And yeah,
I mean,
so
I think we've talked about death and we're talking about bodies. I think it's important that, like, um, the smell of hand rolled and cut pasta and roasted chicken thighs and garlic and onions, like if I smell any of that, um I instantly think of my grandmother,
yeah,
um who was an Italian immigrant and had a little restaurant, um that I can remember the smell of uh different grandparents. My grandfather's like aftershave on like his Oxford like shirt,
yeah,
right? I remember, like, I can, whenever I smell like pipe smoke, I immediately go to like the inside of my Uncle Frank's. Like, everything was leather, right? Everything was leather in the Cadillac. Um, and so like, I mean, so your question, Tony, like it isn't like, because there is an obsession with bodily health, um, that I think participates in this delusion that we get to get out of life alive,
wellness,
or
wellness.
there is nothing beyond the grave, and therefore we have to regiment every second of our lives in order to wring as much life out of our lives as possible. I think that is of the devil. Um, but I do think there are, we're not ideas. The people in our lives are not ideas. They're people who smell a certain way, and their insides of their hands feel a certain way, and
Yeah,
it's one of the things I think about it every Sunday when people come up for communion. Like I could describe 3 dozen people's hands, who are there every Sunday,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
It's
part of who
it's
they are.
well, it's like we all hear the stories, and it's true that the things people hold on to, even when they may be experiencing uh, cognitive impairment, is music, sounds, and smells. you know,
Mhm.
and it's the smells that are so evocative. Dennis makes a good comment online here. He says, I think he's responding to my question about glorifying God in the body. He says, trusting Him in illness, capital H, trusting God in illness, enduring weakness without despair, living faithfully even when your body fails. That's powerful. Yeah, and um, I think also I think about the Olympics, they're I mean, obviously, incredible, um, um, discipline, use, extraordinary achievement with human body, And some of that is just, well, it's not just, some of it is under great pressure and competition, but some of it, occasionally it felt like there's
Hmm.
an offering, that is made. This is the very best my body can do, and I offer it to God, um, not just to the judges. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a beauty There's tremendous beauty in these athletes.
Or just like, right, like the gold medal game overtime wouldn't be as powerful for Americans if the guy hadn't gotten his teeth knocked out the hour before that.
Right. Right.
That there's a bodily sacrifice that makes that more true to us.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, and then the bodily sacrifice of people who are put their bodies in a place, as people did in the civil rights movement on Bloody Sunday, or
Mhm.
soldiers put their body in a place. Um, this is glorifying God in our bodies.
Yeah, and because yeah, it's like Lent begins every year with Jesus like starting out hungry and ending up emaciated, right? It's about his body. That like Nicodemus comes to Jesus, and Jesus is responding to his questions by talking about his body being lifted up before others and drawing
Yeah.
other people's bodies to himself, and analogizing to a mother's womb. What because you talked about these John passages, Tony, like yeah, another passage is an occasion for Jesus to, so he's at a well and he's thirsty. um
Yeah.
and he's talking to a a stranger, a woman, uh about what she's done in and with her body, right? Like, I mean, and then like Holy Week is like it's all material, from the coats and the palm leaves on the road to like literally Jesus' body being passed from one person to the next, from from Thursday night until Friday at noon. um yeah and so if yeah and so like Christianity cannot be reduced to watching Todd on a screen or listening to me in your earbuds, or going to a church that resembles a theater or an auditorium, and receiving instructions on how to live your best life now from Tony.
And of
Uh,
course, the church is the body of Christ.
yeah.
The body of Christ.
Oh, and the bride, which presumes that like someone's
Yeah.
going to do something to that person's body. Like,
So before we get too far away from it, I just wanted to mention a wonderful Japanese film about the care of the body at death, called Departures.
hmm.
It's probably 10 or 15 years old at this point, but it's quite extraordinary, and I commend it to anybody. I did notice that in the comment thread, somebody raised the question about cremation in light of this discussion, which is probably understandable. And I confess I'm a little conflicted about that. I probably will be cremated. I chose the place this summer where I want my ashes to be, and my wife seems to agree that we will both be there. Um, but it's still, I kind of wonder a little bit about that. But I don't have any great light to shed on the matter.
um, I saw Maylee's comment. I just th- my friend Thomas Lynch, Undertaker poet, um,
Yeah,
has written about this, and he converted me a long time ago. Um, that it isn't that like the God who raises Jesus from the dead can't put Tony back together again from dust, right? We just had Ash Wednesday. um, it isn't that. It's that um, Tom argues that cremation, as it's too often practiced in America, participates in this. I don't know if he would use the word Gnostic, but Gnostic reduction of
Hmm.
Judaism and Christianity. And so Tom writes a lot about how, and for a while I tried to do this, and then people just rebelled, and I was shouting into the wind. But he's, like he says that as an undertaker, when people choose cremation, he's like, okay, well, this is the day and the time that we will bring them to the fire, and I expect you to accompany them with me.
And I did that with my sister, and it's quite a moment. And my nephew, her son, was the one who, you know, hit the switch that cremated her body. So I agree with that, but I don't know. I remain ambivalent. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was an undertaker. He was somebody who took him under, and
But and like what and it isn't just that one practice is better than the other. It's um I think being a pastor in Northern Virginia, where I have had to do a number of burials for um, people from Latin America and people from Africa, and I noticed the difference between white people and other people. And so, like, white people are very comfortable with having the graveside service and then leaving before anyone lowers the casket into the ground.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and then I noticed that Christians from other parts of the world absolutely will not do that.
huh,
And so I think there's a way to bury people that is also wrong.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so if that body matters because God's going to resurrect it, you should bury it in a way that's commensurate with that promise.
Well, Tom Long's great book on funerals and dying accompanied them with singing. That we go with them to this point of uh, departure and offering to God, singing God's praises as we do. And there's so many of these things that one wishes we did better. I feel like in some ways cremation is a concession to our idolatry of convenience.
Eh, uh, uh, yeah, while we're name dropping, our friend, Ken Jones, white Ken Jones, not black Ken Jones, white Ken Jones, you know, he wrote his dissertation, on 16th century German funeral preaching. Um, and his thesis was that if you wanted to see whether or not Luther's Reformation really took hold among people, it would show up in funeral preaching. And I think the correlative to that, right, the converse of that is that um, like our funeral practices, our practices, how we treat the dead and dying, reveal that the actual health of Christianity more than sermon downloads and worship attendance.
I think another thing that I would put a plug for as a way of glorifying God uh, is eating together and the family
Mm.
meal.
Yeah,
In both of our sons' families, it's a priority that the family eat together every night, and I just think I just thank God for that. It's not
yeah,
always easy, and I'm sure there are sometimes they aren't able to pull it off, but we were with them last night, and it was just so such a bundle of fun and joy and activity.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had I don't know, somewhere in the middle of elementary school, some kid came up to me, um, in the fellowship hall on Sunday and was like, "Well, how do I fast?" And I was like, "That's a great question." I'm just and that only came up because I mentioned the temptation story, and there's, yeah, I mean, it's important that we get up in the middle of the service and pass that piece. and like touch other people and maybe get sick from that. It's important that like, yeah, I put something inside your hand that may or may not be calloused. Or like the people who I know are like have cancer and they like grab a hold of my hand like it's like a life
Mm-hmm.
preserver. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's important that we like, in my church at least, like we mark time by changing the colors of the paraments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that like sanctuaries are pointed in a particular direction for a reason. And like we bury the dead facing a certain way and like all that stuff. Like, yeah. So Tony mentioned Departures, Japanese movie. And I think this is relevant. Uh, every year we subject our children to an art house film on Thanksgiving Eve.
To what?
Like an art house film.
Oh.
So we go to like the tiny little old person theater here in Fairfax, and we make them see
Oh,
a
yeah.
movie that like.
Oh, yeah.
And so yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
usually we're the only ones in there. And so like last year it was Nora, which I didn't know was about a sex worker until we were there. And that was a little awkward. It was a great movie. And this year we saw Rental Family, about an actor who lives in Japan and takes on this role of whatever people, he pretends to be someone's friend or someone's father. And that also like in a similar way it gets at like people suffering from a disconnected, disembodied world, paying for a friend or a spouse or a connection. So yeah.
While I'm on the topic of Japanese films, another great one is Perfect Day, which is about a guy who cleans toilets in Tokyo, which may sound odd or awful, but one of the things in Japan is that the bathrooms and the public bathrooms are immaculate.
Hmm.
It is, and I suppose you could consider that a little
Just
bit.
like Paris.
Oh, you really? Yeah. Well, it's not like Seattle, I'll tell you that. But it's for him, it's obviously a ministry.
Mm.
But it's a wonderful film, Perfect Day or Perfect Days, something like that. Very deep, a lot to it.
I mean, we're on the topic of bodies. My wife and I were in Quito. I think it was this past summer. Maybe it was the summer before. We went 2 years in a row. And so like a lot of places in Latin America, when you go to like a public restroom, you have to like pay for the toilet paper. And so like, yeah. And then, and that was like the day where I was like, oh my gosh, my travel freeze is about over. And I give her, whatever it was. And she gives me like, I don't know, like that much. And I was like, here, I need more. I'm going to need more.
Well, speaking of bodies, I need to pee. So you guys can wrap the session up and carry on. I don't know which, but I'm gonna bow out for the moment.
Wow, he really had to go too. Well, on that note, thank you all. So we're done with this book, Todd.
Okay.
Josh chose this book. So what we do next is up to you. I subjected people to the Bulgakov book, which I felt like was, received as warmly as playing the bongos in church. So it's on you now, sir.
Okay. I'll go look at my wish
We
list
could always
and
like
see,
just talk
what we
about
should
the
do.
Bible.
Yeah. We can do
We
that.
could always just talk about the Bible. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Or oh gosh, I have his books. Oh gosh. What's his name? James, the Baptist systematic theologian that Harwas has used.
Clendenning.
Yeah, James McClendon.
McClendon. I've got his 3-volume systematic. I don't know that everyone wants to do that one.
Probably not, actually. Yeah, we don't want to do that. But yeah,
I'll
I mean, maybe we should read some sermons by Robert Jeffries. Kind of do the Southern Baptist thing. You know,
You're going to need to find a Southern Baptist to sit in for that one.
who's the guy that just did the Christian nationalist service at the Pentagon? Was he?
Oh, he's not
Wilson?
Southern Baptist. No, he's
he's not Southern
CREC.
Baptist.
Oh,
He's
no,
what?
no, Doug Wilson. CREC. It's his own denomination. I think he got maybe into trouble at a denomination, started his own. I mean, that's one way to do it, right?
So he started his own denomination. Huh.
And now everything's headquartered there in Idaho.
Does that come with dental?
He's from Moscow, Idaho.
Moscow, Idaho.
Wow.
Which is not far from where my family's from in northeastern Oregon. And he's got a presence over there. There are churches that are kind of under his umbrella. And yeah, it's a big topic of discussion. Ross Stouthead did an interview with him on his Interesting Times series, in which he came off as I would say, reasonable. But maybe he was.
That's Ross's whole project.
Reason? Yeah.
Just try. Yeah. Not being alarmed by anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's the worst. I think he's the worst.
Do you? I thought his book Believe was pretty good, but
he's a good writer. But I think his mealy-mouthed both sidesism is just not very helpful.
Okay, well, today on my blog, I revealed the Trump decoder ring.
Mm-hmm.
How's that selling?
How to listen to the State of the Union.
Why? What on earth would possess you ever to watch that?
What?
Why would anyone ever watch any of those?
Yeah, it's a good question. And most of the people that read my blog said, thanks, that was kind of entertaining, but I would never spend an hour watching that. But anyhow,
you think it'll be just an hour?
Yeah, the key to understanding is that whenever Trump casts aspersions or negativeness or says appalling things about people, like he said, the Supreme Court or the majority are very unpatriotic and have violated the Constitution, he's actually talking about himself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a whole lot of stuff is just projection.
I am very unpatriotic and I have violated the Constitution. You just have to turn it 180 degrees to understand what's going on.
Yeah, every accusation is a confession.
Yeah, there you go.
But still,
thank you, Tom.
I mean, to bring up, I mean, we've been talking about glorifying the body, the goodness of material things. There are good things that you can do, like pick up a book and read it. Have a snack, make love to a loved one, not, you don't have to watch the State of the Union. It was
that is true.
I'm sure Bad
That
Bunny
is true, but
is great,
don't you?
But I've never ever watched the halftime show ever. I mean, I don't even watch football, but
Well, this year the halftime show was the main thing. I say that as a Seattle Seahawks fan. I mean, it was the game itself was sort of an anticlimax. We had more people in their backfield than they did.
But as someone from the East Coast, you should appreciate that nobody in the rest of the country really thinks of Seattle as America, to the extent that you have sports teams.
Well, Trump doesn't for different reasons, but it's clear that anything any sports team does here is regarded as something being done in some distant colony.
Yeah, you're basically Vancouver. Yeah.
Vancouver's a great city. I wouldn't mind being part of Vancouver, but Seattle's a great city too. But it's good to be under the radar.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm betting Seattle gets an NBA team in the expansion.
It may happen, and we're banking on the Mariners to get back to the the playoffs. Okay,
there you go. You got him now.
I can talk baseball. I don't know about the
Well, you bring Tier back to talk about the Baltimore Orioles.
I mean, I did see more Orioles games last year than Nats games.
Huh.
So, all right. Well,
Okay.
I'll get something to you, and we'll.
What's
we'll put
amazing
something
is
out.
like no one has left. No one has left during this nonsense.
The
What is it?
outtakes.
What is it we're doing for next week? All right, maybe you discussed that during my.
Well, I said that.
No,
I said
I'm supposed to come up with something.
for Advent. I made everyone read Sergei Bulgakov, and everybody hated it. And Josh Moneykeisen chose John Behr's book, and so
Can't we just? We didn't talk much about the John 3 text. We could talk about John 3 and John 4
I did
next
suggest.
week.
I did suggest that, like, I did say that, like, one of my gripes is that Christians read more books than they read the book. And so
Let's talk about John 3 and John 4, the Nicodemus and the Samaritan woman.
Well, there you go.
There we go.
Your job is done, Todd.
Hey, I love consensus.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for tolerating this silliness.
Love you all. Okay, bye.
Love you. See you.